We're entering MIrrlees Fields on this evening early in September, and we see here one of the information boards that was erected by the Friends group with MAN and Cheshire Wildlife Trust. This path is now in very good condition. Once upon a time it was extremely muddy in this corner here, but I'm pleased to say these days it's easy to walk. I'm going to take the footpath, and we can see one of the benches that we erected here being used by local lads. Thank you. And in this corner here we can see one of the sculptures now getting slightly overgrown, which provides a map of the fields, and also the posts that showed MIrrlees Walk. That was put up with the funding that was applied for and granted by Manchester TFGM. Now we're looking across the fields. This is the end of summer. The grass is quite long now, and in the foreground here you can see the fence that's been erected by MAN recently to restrict access to the fields, but actually many people still walk on this beautiful open area. We face here, we can see the lovely open skies that we get, and as the sun sets in the west. On that west side we see the line of oaks, and of course in the middle of the field the so-called MIrrlees oak. In this area here, these poplar trees, this is where the buzzards have been nesting for the last few years. A very valuable site really for wildlife. Now there's a pond in this quite overgrown area, which is the other side of the MIrrlees, or rather MAN's private land. So it does provide quite a haven, because there is no public access into that corner. Now as we approach these trees here, it is interesting to note that these trees were only planted in 2009 when the new MAN logistics building was put up, and we asked that the building should be shielded from public, for this is after all part of the Fred Perry Way. So we asked that these trees be planted. Here's one of the benches with a lovely view across the fields. And the trees have grown remarkably in that period of 14 years, and they do very successfully hide the large MAN building which is behind here. View of the sunset, lovely September evening, looking across the main field here, which is the site of the planning application to put 200 houses. So this is the area that would be lost if that application were to be granted. The appeal against the council's refusal to grant the planning application will be held next month in October. So there will be many local people who are hoping that the appeal will be lost and that we will keep access to the fields. The history of these fields is that, of course, they were once agricultural land, but up until 1987 there were cricket fields, football fields, hockey fields, and it was maintained as playing fields. And then just in that area there, you can just see the base of what was the pavilion for these playing fields. Since 1987, all formal recreation has stopped, but it has become a very popular area for informal recreation. That is to say, people walking, picnicking, flying kites, children playing, climbing trees, and particularly during the period of the lockdown, this field was very popular indeed. And I mean, I can remember counting 30 or more people somewhere on this field at any one time. And of course, people come onto it, they cross it, they come off it again. But it was extraordinarily popular during the period where people couldn't get in their cars and go further afield. So we're just coming round the perimeter of the field and coming down to this line of trees here. Inside or behind these trees here is the stream which crosses MIrrlees Fields. Incidentally, what we have here, this strip of concrete, is the old cricket nets. That's all that's left. There used to be the nets around that concrete base. So let's go down this path here. I'm not sure how overgrown it might be this time of the year, but we will see. Incidentally, there is a stand of Japanese knotweed here. That is what we're walking through right now. We don't have very much by way of Himalayan balsam on this site, and that is purely because the Friends group every year, until this year, or maybe last year as well, when access has been restricted, but before that, every year, the MIrrlees Fields Friends group have removed any balsam that was found, and so we've managed to keep on top of it, where in most parts of Stockport the balsam has run riot. Here is a stream crossing the field, and here is one of the orienteering posts, which is also a post for the Eco Explorer. It seems to have been a little bit vandalised, but I think it's still functioning. The important part of it is the QR code, which anybody who's got the Explorer app can use the QR code to find out about some information on trees and flora, birds that might be seen in the area, and some questions aimed at 6, 7, 8-year-olds from the local primary school. So here we are again, coming out onto the the big field, and potentially we will be coming onto the edge here of a housing estate. Aerial photographs from the 1930s showed that this line of oaks here were very, as you would expect, very much smaller then. So these trees may be about 100 years old. That's just a guess really, because if they were quite small in the 30s, that would suggest they were coming up to 100 or perhaps a little bit more than 100 years old, as we are now in 2023. Looking across the field there, we can see the poplar trees, and just between those trees there is the building that MAN erected. So we're walking around the perimeter path now. As you can see, it's a very well used path. I mean, it wouldn't be worn like this if there weren't dozens of people walking along this path every day, every single day, from more or less daylight through to sunset, which is about where we are now. When we are now, I should say. The field is used by many people, not only by people walking with their dogs, but by families with their children on little bikes, or walking or running. This grass used to be kept under control because it was mowed at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, and that meant that it could be used probably more than it is now for things like athletics. So one of the local running clubs used to meet here, and they would do their training on this field, but that's a little more difficult now that the ground has not been mown for several years. In fact, ever since the housing estate the other side of the factory was erected and access became difficult, the mowing has not occurred, so the grass has gone rather wild. Cheshire Wildlife Trust have told us it would actually be better if the grass were mowed on a regular basis. So just coming back to where I entered the field and completed the circuit of the big field, or sometimes called Gorsey Field, of the MIrrlees fields.